What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you'll never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Wednesday, May 15th, 2019, middle of the weekday, hump day, starting that long, slow glide down to Pauhana Friday and whatever other adventures lie in store for us. And I'm going to start it by apologizing. Yesterday, I was hit by a bug. I was under the weather. I just couldn't get up and get the show done. And I guess it's part of the price you pay for getting old, that you're fragile and, these things happen. I don't think I missed too many days on this show, though. I think I got a pretty good attendance record here. Anyway, we've got a lot to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. The Sam is in our control room, ready to answer the phone, put you on the air with your comments, questions, opinions. So let's get right into it. First of all, it's Nakba Day. It's the anniversary of the creation of the state of Israel. And of course, Nakba is how it's described by the Palestinians, being the catastrophe when their country was basically chopped up and a large portion of it given to Israel. And Israel's been trying to grab more of it ever since here. All right, let's turn to Iran here because things are very, very tense over there. And they've got this, situation still escalating from last weekend where 4 ships were sabotaged with what they're now saying were limpet mines, which are mines with magnets on them, and frogmen swim up, slap them on the side of the hull, set the timer, and then they leave. And clearly, given that most of the mines were above the water line and in locations where massive flooding couldn't take place, it looks like this definitely was a false flag to make it look like the ships had been attacked. But the ships themselves, they're going to have to be repaired, but it won't take very long or cost very much to do that here. But it is, of course, this pivotal movement in Trump's pumped-up feud with Iran. Now, Iran, of course, is denying anything to do with this. They're reminding the world about how the U.S. has lied before to get wars started, including Saddam's nuclear weapons. So the war of words is continuing here. But, of course, any attack on shipping in or close to the Strait of Hormuz is a serious business because the Strait of Hormuz is this choke point for the international oil trade. And that's why earlier Iran was saying that if the U.S. continues to provoke them, they would try and shut that down. And that would throw the entire oil economy of the world into a tailspin. So basically, the U.S. has not provided any proof that Iran had anything to do with these limpet mines. And it's just cranked up the tensions in the area. Sort of reminds me of the USS Cole, which is widely believed to have been another false flag attack. Apparently, along with these ships being attacked, oil, the pipelines, the ships, the oil must flow. That's what it's really all about, oil and oil currency, the petrodollar. So apparently, a high-ranking Houthi military official speaking on condition of target in Saudi Arabia. And this operation saw 7 unmanned drones carry out an attack on these 2 oil pumping stations, and apparently was done in retaliation for Saudi attacks on civilians in Yemen. Civilians, including women and children, were killed, and more than 10 others sustained injuries after Saudi-led warplanes carried out airstrikes on a truck loaded with fruit in Sada'a. And a separate spate of airstrikes hit heavily. What can I tell you here? But pretty much everybody is looking at this limpet mine attack and saying, oh, come on, we've seen this all before. Story out of checkpointasia.net is saying, this is a Persian Gulf of Tonkin. And pointing out there's no indication as to who was actually responsible or why the damage was inflicted. But it occurred at the same time and place off the coast of the United Arab Emirates, only days after the United States had dispatched warships and bombers to the area to deter these claimed threats from Iran. Emphasis on claim. Now, the location is near a sea lane critical to the world's supply of oil, which we mentioned there before. All right, pardon me. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. So Iran is out there saying, you have to remember all the U.S. lies before the Iraq War. And they're pointing the finger at John Bolton, who was up to his neck in those lies that led to the war in Iraq. And yeah, he was. All these allegations about nuclear weapons, weapons of mass destruction that were never found. And we know that the U.S. government loves to lie to get us into wars. That's how we've gotten into most of the wars. The Lusitania not smuggling weapons to Great Britain, torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin, a Spanish mine in Havana Harbor, Pearl Harbor was a surprise, and so forth and so on. Now, the New York Times came out with a story on how the White House is reviewing the military plans against Iran, including the deployment of 120,000 troops to the Middle East. Should Iran, or somebody pretending to be Iran, attack American forces or accelerate their work on nuclear weapons? Now, the Times is citing, as usual, unnamed administration officials, and said Acting Defense Secretary, soon to be the Defense Secretary, Patrick Shanahan, presented the plan at a meeting of Trump's top security aides on Thursday. Reuters could not immediately confirm the report. The White House is already denying the sending of 120,000 troops. Trump tweeted on out if he was going to do that, he'd send a heck of a lot more than that. But tensions are definitely ratcheting up ever since Trump pulled out of that nuclear deal. And a lot of people keep pointing on back to that. Iran isn't the problem here. The United States is. They're less than enthusiastic, shall we say. So apparently there was this British general. He's the British general in charge of the British forces in Iraq. Major General Chris Geika said he sees absolutely no evidence of an increased threat from Iran, either to Syria or to Iraq. And of course, that led the White House to verbally chastise him and say, you know, how can you not see what a tremendous threat Iran is going to be? Meanwhile, an advisor to Iran's president has mocked Donald Trump as being the poodle of his hardline national security advisor, John Bolton, saying, this is what happens when you listen to the mustache. And yes, I know the YouTube feed is wacky again today. I'm starting to look in the Middle East on have done something like that. Iran doesn't want war. They don't want U.S. bombers flying over their territory, blowing things up. They don't want to suffer the fate that Iraq suffered. They're doing everything they can to avoid war. They have endured just crippling sanctions. They're just trying to get along. Why, when they were screaming about Assad is gassing his own people? Why would he do it? Why would he gas women and children, knowing it's the one thing that would allow the United States to say, oh yes, we have on the so-called attack at Ghouta, and concluded it had been staged. It was a fake. So the U.S. keeps using the phrase Iran or its proxies, meaning it may be somebody working in Iran's interest that Iran has no control over, but what the heck, let's go get Iran anyway. So Iran is out there and they're starting to talk a little tough. They're vowing to defeat the U.S.-Israeli alliance, confronting any serious military adversary such as the U.S. or Israel, even if they combine their forces. Well, let's get a little realistic here. There is no question that, well, first of all, Israel is a nuclear armed state. So is the United States. And the United States military does outmatch that of Iran. But Iran, given its location and given the weapons that it does have, is capable of inflicting a lot of damage all across the Middle East. So this will not be an easy war. It will not be as easy as Iraq was. Now, Bernie Sanders basically came on out with an online address saying we would be an unconstitutional and illegal breach of office. Absolutely right about that. And he's saying it would be an absolute disaster. And he said 16 years ago, the United States committed one of the worst foreign policy blunders in the history of our country by attacking Iraq. That war was sold to the American people based on a series of lies about weapons of mass destruction. And don't forget the first Iraq war. That one was sold with that ridiculous story about the incubators. So I may not agree with Bernie Sanders on a lot of things, but I agree with him on this. Okay, I am going to briefly cycle the YouTube feed and hopefully we'll get a different server. And up in Canada, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. You know I have a great deal of respect for your knowledge of history, but I think it's really important that we try to avoid inflaming the hostilities that are growing now between Muslims and Palestinians and the Zionist lobby. And I'll ask you to go back and look for where was the federal seat of government if it was a country. It was always an administrative province from the days from prehistoric times, always under invasion by one or the other, from Egypt on up to the days of the Ottomans. It became a mandate under the British authorities specifically to hand it over to the Jews that were the Zionists that were financing Britain's war enterprises. But at the time, before the mandate was created, the British Mandate of Palestine, it was an administrative province with one person appointed by the Ottoman Parliament to represent the very different groups of people is one very common example, and numerous other Muslim Assyrians, many Muslim groups were brought into it was called the satrapy from the days of the Persian administrative times. So in truth, this is why I have often said there never was one genetic ethnic Palestinian identity, that there was in Bethlehem, where I lived, every tribe was allowed to have its own administrative authority. The heads of the tribes would act as the government for a certain number of families. My family, 4. So the country that was stolen. Israel itself, I have no sympathy, more than I sympathize with both parties. Both extremes on the continuum are giving very distorted views of what was going on. So with all due respect to your historical knowledge, and I'm sure you will look for any evidence of a country called Palestine, with an administrative seat of government and with a military that was that defined its boundaries. It never had defined boundaries. They were always very fluid, depending upon which foreign authority was administrating the region. It is only subsequent to the 48 Day of Independence. And I have to tell you, I never heard the word Nakba until the Arabs had enough oil money to hire a PR firm on Wall Street in New York to create an entire narrative. There was never a Palestinian flag. They adopted the general Arab military flag as the Palestinian flag. And further, in reference to the comments made by Rashida Tlaib, who is inciting a lot of the hostility that we don't need in North America, I found it very ironic. Her maiden name was Harbi. harb in the Arab language means war, so they may have been a very aggressive people to begin with. And she certainly is a very aggressive voice. Even Palestinian scholars have criticized her comments. But anyway, that's just something I wanted to stress, that because of the fact that the Muslims and Zionist Jews seem to be facing off on our turf where we now live, we do not need to believe any of the distortions that are not historically accurate. So thank you very much for your patience in hearing me out, and I hope you will indeed check the historical documents and look for where was the Palestinian government located, and how did it administer its boundaries, and how did it define its boundaries before the mandate. It's only during the British mandate that boundaries were clearly defined. And again, all of that was set up by the Sykes-Picot Agreement of 1916, which was secret until recently.
Okay, well, Layla, we're going to have to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials. We have other callers waiting on the line, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And responding to Layla's commentary, I think she's setting some arbitrary restrictions on what constitutes a country. She said at one point, federal government. Well, there have been countries throughout history that didn't have federal governments. They had rulers, certainly. They had organizational structures. And I'm getting some email basically saying the same thing. Please, Layla, with your semantics, nation or not, it's Palestinian land that's being confiscated. And that's absolutely true. And I got another one here saying that Palestine was a country. There are government documents, official letters, and coins that are stamped Palestine in Arabic dating from the 7th century until 1948, when the native Palestinians were driven from their homes and the state of Israel was established on stolen land. All right, let's get back to the phones here. Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I just wanted to call in. I mean, that Layla, come on, Mike. Like, what is she even talking about? Come on.
Hello?
Mike?
Yes, are you there?
Yeah, that Layla. I mean, what is she even doing? I mean, she's always calling in like, she's like, she always wants to call in and, she talk about some stuff, and then nobody ever wants to, like, argue with her. She always has her own point and stuff.
Well, she has her points of view. She has a right to her opinion. She's very knowledgeable. There's no question about that. And, I do get a lot of email from people who do like her. So,
I don't know. I know the guy, what's his name, from Los Angeles?
Peter.
What's his name? John?
Peter
from Los Angeles. I think he's one of the more, popular callers, Mike, versus me,
Okay.
I know a lot of people like Peter from Los Angeles, because he always breaks it down. I mean, come on.
Okay, well, anything else?
Mike, I don't know. It's always the end of the world, right, Mike?
Yeah, sometimes it feels like that, and makes this show very, very difficult to do. I wish I had more positive news to report, but I really don't. Anyway, Dustin, we're going to let you go. The phone lines are really loaded up, and we're going to switch over to Art off the grid. Aloha, Art. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Every morning I get up, I start my day by coffee and news. And, I woke up this morning, and the first thing I see is a New York Times article talking about plans for invading Iran are being talked about, in the White House and all of this. And I read the article, and, the first thing come to mind was, and there was another caller that actually has, in passing, mentioned this as well, that, the first thing came to my mind as I was reading the article is, okay, they need something to happen to give them an excuse.
Yes.
Could we be right now the setting of the stage for another Gulf of Tonkin event.
Yes.
Remember, the Gulf of Tonkin, folks, never happened. It was a true false flag. It never, ever happened. But boy, it sure as hell got us into the war, didn't it?
Yeah.
So that's the first thing I thought. I was kind of curious what you thought.
Well, again, it's no secret that war with Iran has been in the offing. I mean, it was certainly on the very top of that list that General Wesley Clark blew the whistle on all those years ago. We know that Israel has always wanted the United States to launch a war against Iran. We know that John Bolton's been talking war with Iran going all the way back to when he was still making war on Iraq. It's just a case of they're trying to figure out, how do we sell this to the American people who are tired of war? There's been so many of these wars. So how do we sell them one more? Do we use the "we're bringing democracy there," or do we using the they attacked us, we have no choice, we must respond? I think that's the way they're going to go with it. And I don't know why they didn't go with the attack on those tankers over the weekend. It's starting to look like they're shifting gears into an attack on U.S. forces inside Iraq. Then they can just go right across that joint border, although Baghdad is saying no, they're not going to be allowed to do that.
Yeah, I was kind of curious about all that because, what really troubles me is, here in the alternative media, or what I like to refer to as the alternate, not alternative, the alternate media.
Yes.
We've been talking about this for, at least a decade.
Yes.
And, it just stunned me to wake up this morning and see that they're going public with it now. They're admitting again that we were right, that this was the plan all along.
Yeah, it was. Okay, well, Art, listen, I'm going to have to let you go. And we're going to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And already I'm getting emails saying that people don't think that the caller claiming to be Dustin from New Jersey was the real Dustin from New Jersey. And I note that Dustin is still in the phone queue here. And so he's 2 calls away. So let's go to Tony in Puerto Rico. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. Yeah, it didn't sound like Dustin because he's always starting with a wisecrack. Anyway, I love Layla, no matter what anybody says. But that's not my question. My question is this: a few times you mentioned that Iran hadn't attacked the country in 200 years. Am I correct?
I said Iran has not initiated a war of conquest in 200 years.
About 200 years. Okay. What about the attack on the American embassy? Isn't that technically an attack on another country?
It wasn't a war of conquest. They were basically, taking the hostages and basically trying to force the U.S. to recognize the new government.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you, Mike.
All right, and we're going to switch over to Mike in Kentucky. Aloha, Mike. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I haven't got a chance to listen since last Friday much. Have you talked about the Freedom of Information Act request and I never have traced it down to who actually got this out of the FBI, but it's kind of curious what they have redacted in that report with the dancing Israeli photos from, the urban moving systems. Have you seen those?
Yes, I have, and I don't have the full details on that story. I know Ryan Dawson was part of that, but they got those photos and were able to basically put them together along with the photos taken.
They can certainly probably match up who was wearing what clothes, but the real sort of smoking gun there, where you can't see the guy with the lighter in front of the towers to be able to tell how much smoke was coming off the towers, because that would imply when they had gotten there and whether or not they had prior knowledge if they
hit the first tower. And these Israelis, when they were sent back home to Israel, they appeared on TV saying that their purpose was to document the event. And the videotape from their video camera is in fact still classified. And obviously, if that
they
video...
have video that's classified. I didn't know they had video.
Yeah, they had a video camera set up. It was on a tripod. And obviously, if that video shows the first impact, that would be ironclad proof. They knew that something was going to happen.
So that's a nice big can of worms. I mean, whether or not these guys were Mossad and whether or not they were just saying, oh, everybody wanted a picture of this in their camera, you know, and mistranslation that they were there to document the event, meaning they were sent there to document the event versus just went there. One of the witnesses apparently, you know, they're going to try to claim that they miscalculated what time it was because one of them said they'd been there since 8 a.m. In their FBI interrogation. So there's a lot there, I think, to unpack, and it looks pretty incriminating that the FBI would I can understand maybe why they would blank out their faces, but you know, the contrast being so high on the photocopy that you cannot see the towers in the background looks like a cover-up. I'll let you go. I know you got a lot of callers.
All right. Well, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go, and now we're going to go to what I think is the real Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, I'm going to file a copyright infringement. It's like me calling up saying this is Mike Rivero from Hawaii. You know, like why would you do that unless it's like an ulterior motive of trying to ruin this show?
Well, I don't know that he did much damage. In fact, the way he just kept stalling like that, he wasn't very good at what he was trying to do.
Yeah, real quick on 9/11, I was home that day, and I watched on George Washington, like when they pulled over the white van on George Washington Parkway.
Yeah.
And you know that there was that white van. There were supposedly two white vans.
Yeah, there were two white vans, and they both belonged to Urban Moving Systems. And the owner of Urban Moving Systems basically just left for for Israel the very next day. And because it was also a storage facility, the authorities had to come on in with bolt cutters so that the customers could get their stuff back out of their storage lockers.
And that was on Fox News, actually, because I forgot his name on Fox, but he did that Israeli largest spy ring ever in the history of this country. And you can watch it on YouTube if you can find it. But
that's like, Carl Cameron. Carl Cameron on Fox News was a 4-part story. In fact, it's still linked to my 9/11 page, and I remember watching it and seeing how quickly all the other commentators around Carl said, but there's absolutely no link between this Israeli spy ring and 9/11. There absolutely is not any link.
More like it was a spy ring / Israel was their handlers, the 9/11 hijackers from which elements of Saudi Arabia, which is, Wahhabi terrorists, that was their handlers. That's why they skedaddled. Right after that, they skedaddled. Clean the place out, whatever they had there, and that's it. Yeah,
yep.
So, Israel was involved, just like they tried to sink the USS Liberty. If they're your friends, why would they try to sink the USS Liberty? If they're your friends, remember Jonathan Pollard? Everybody remembers him, right?
Yep.
The spy?
Yep.
So they're not your friends. They never were. Neither are the Saudis. They're just companions, and when it suits you. And on this Iran thing, I saw the damage from one of the ships, like nothing there. It looked like it backed into something.
Yeah, whatever was used, it was very, very small, and it doesn't look like they wanted to sink the ships. They just wanted to do enough damage where the news cameras could say, "Ooh, look, the ships were attacked."
Yeah, Iran has there's no benefit for them doing this.
No.
Because we're the aggressor. So we're the one that's going to attack them first, and then they have to respond. Because everybody knows what we did with Iraq and Libya and Syria and Ukraine and Yemen. So Iran would never do this. It's just not part of them. Now if you attack them, sure they will. And there'd be a lot more damage than this little knick-knack stuff. It's like the knick-knack stuff. The ships are still floating, and also the pipeline's already back and running. So
yes.
This was done. It didn't work, though. That British general, I mean, you know what the Pentagon's telling Trump? He's telling, like, they're saying that most likely wasn't. So then who would be? It'd be UAE / Saudi Arabia and Israel. You know, that's it. UAE being the biggest suspect because they do the Saudi Arabian Israelis bidding. You know, and most likely John Bolton would know about because this is that group
Yes.
of people. You know, but yeah, what I mean, this is the kind of crap that gets you into world wars. I mean.
Yeah, it is. It absolutely is. And even worse, of course, because we've seen so much of this stuff before, it's not like it's really going to work. I think the American people are wise enough now to understand that the United States wants to start these wars for purely economic reasons and to placate Israel, and that whatever cover story or event is going to come on up is likely to be a fraud. We know that those chemical weapons attacks on civilians in Syria were false flag attacks, if they even happened at all. The one in Ghouta apparently didn't. We know that Saddam didn't have any nuclear weapons. It just goes on. That's the formula. Lie to the people, stage a false flag, go to war.
Mike, if you go watch the Duran, they did the thing on the Duma attack where that OPCW included basically now the engineering part. They said that bomb was placed there.
Yes.
It wasn't dropped, so that means it was placed there on purpose to be like, you know, by the moderate rebel terrorists, whatever you call them. You know, that was placed there by them. So that was a false flag, people.
It was just a prop. It was just a movie prop.
Yeah. Yep. And Mike, do I still have any time left? I want to talk real quick about if anybody has a chance. I don't really like the PBS, but they had something called PBS Frontline: Trump's Trade War, and everybody needs to watch that from start to finish. It's not very long. It's about 30 or 40 minutes, but it's definitely a great watch of how it's not going to work out for Trump. You know, we need the systematic changes here, not China. They got the manufacturing. We need fixing here.
Yes.
You know, like our infrastructure. I mean, it's just people need to watch the video and you know, get their own what they think of it. But I thought it was a pretty good watch, even though it's PBS. All right, Mike, have a good show.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. The phone lines are now empty, and let's get on back here to the news. So nobody's buying that Iran is a threat. That British general is not. Story coming out of the original antiwar.com, the United States of Aggression. And this article just excoriates the United States, meaning the U.S. government, say, you know, what the heck is going on? And saying that, you know, plans for deploying 120,000 troops to the Middle East, presumably to go to war against Iran, demonstrates Washington's foreign policy has gone off the rails. And corporate media is not really paying a lot of attention. They're paying some, but they're still trying to make a lot of noise about the Mueller report. And this idea of going to war against Iran, it's illegal, it's unwarranted, it's a violation of international law. We're going to war against another sovereign power thousands of miles from our shores that has done nothing wrong to us other than sit over a bunch of oil that the United States deems must be trafficked in U.S. dollars. Noam Chomsky is out there as well. What exactly is the threat of Iran? And the rest of the world agrees it's the U.S. that is the problem. All right, we got some callers on the line. Jim in New York, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Yeah, before I start, I want to ask, on your bumper music, you have this song with like some kind of a music on this person gives like a monosyllabic noise in between. What is that?
I'm sorry. One more time. What was the question?
Okay, in your bumper music, one of your bumper music songs, it's like musical notes, and then somebody makes this noise like that, and that's all that goes on. The voice part. What is that?
I think that's one of the pieces of music that my wife did. And
Okay, I was just wondering
the noise you're hearing is a voice going, "Oh yeah," I think.
Oh, it's because I have a suggestion for really great bumper music for you. I mean that your wife, that's good. But how about the theme from Hawaii 5-0?
That's copyrighted, and I don't have the money to buy a license.
Figured it would be. I was wondering, it could be a BMI and all that stuff. You have to pay a lot of money for that, right?
Yeah, you
Okay,
generally. I know a lot of people steal the use of music, but all of the music that's used on my show is used with the permission of the creators.
Yeah, I would assume so. In fact, I was assuming that's why it might not even have that, because I know it probably costs a fortune. Now, I want to say a couple of things without really getting into politics at all about this Palestine and Gaza and all these types of things. Just like some interesting facts that people might not know. The original 5 cities of Gaza, in the time when Samson was captured and brought down the house when they tied him up and put out his eyes, the original 5 cities were Gaza, Ekron, and Gaza, Ekron, and there are 2 in Israel that are in Israel today. Ashdod and Ashkelon in Israel were also part of the Palestinian cities. They're the Philistines. By the way, in today's Arabic language, to say a Palestinian is Philistine. The English did that. The British, when they was getting ready to turn everything loose, they didn't expect that Israel would be so successful in fighting off whatever happened there, and they also put the name Palestine on it as a direct reference to Philistine. But another thing I want to mention with regard to that is if you look in the old the book of Judges and the book of Samuel, the book of Kings, the book of Samuel and the book of Kings, you will see that when kings, they say King Solomon had 1,000 and concubines, 1,000 wives and concubines. A lot of it was political, so he married the daughters of neighboring countries. And one of the women he married was Basparo, the daughter of Pharaoh. Now, Pharaoh in this text is a generic term for the king of Egypt, and he married. It's not the same Pharaoh from the Exodus. It was about 400 years later. But the thing is that when he married the daughter of the Egyptian king, it seemed that Gaza was under the dominion of Egypt at that time, and the wedding present to King Solomon, it's right there in Scripture, the wedding present was Gaza, was given to King Solomon. Now,
okay, you got 1 minute left, so you got to wrap this up. Got to come to a point.
Okay. Just to sum overall, Gaza has always been, even the time when old kings of Israel controlled Israel, it was always a sore point, and it was always a sore point to Israel, and always caused trouble. That's what I wanted to say.
Okay, well, thank you very much for the history lesson there, and everybody's got their opinions about that part of the world, and it's certainly what.
The lady from Canada, she was right. A lot of Arab includes a lot of ethnicities, including Berbers and Circassians, like she said. And there are many, and you can see there are many ethnic and racial differences even within what we call an Arab. There are many different ethnicities.
Okay, all right. Well, listen, now we got to let you go. Got to take another break for commercials. Back with more phone calls after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and we're going to go back to the phones to Pat in Texas. Aloha, Pat. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, yeah, Mike. Some person was talking about, I would say it's the October surprise when the hostages were apprehended and Iran held them out there in the desert, and Jimmy Carter tried to rescue them, and the helicopter got clogged up with sand, and he made a fool of himself. I don't believe...
Well, a lot of people think the helicopter...
Makes sense, but anyway, but I can't give you back the Shah's money, 4.1 million, however it was. And he said because it's already gone to the committee to re-elect President Nixon. And it's gone. And so that's what Obama was saying, that Iran that was their money when he gave them money, but not taken up from Iran. I just believe that they knew Carter was a weak president. He had the military down so bad that we couldn't even help Saddam fight Iran, and we didn't have any ships. And then they were, going to make us, I guess, take us, see how weak we are. And when Reagan raised his hand, they let the hostages go. As soon as he raised his hand to take his oath of office. So whether Honinger was making all that up to exonerate Carter, I don't know. But Bush became vice president anyway, whatever happened.
Yeah.
So I don't believe that. I don't believe that. It's a very elaborate story. But, that shows to go use anybody that you can't believe everything you read in a book. You got to have other things.
Yeah, you got to have multiple sources, and you got to put it together and say, does this make sense? Basically, Carter was another outsider like Trump. He basically had not been part of that internal. CFR. I'm sorry?
He was a CFR member. He was an insider. We just didn't know it. Hey, I voted for him. I'm ashamed of it, but I lived in Georgia, and they convinced me that we should vote for Carter. But really, he gave away the Panama Canal, and now the Chinese have it, I guess. That's what I understand. I heard a guy calling one time a shortwave and said, could America please come back and take the Panama Canal? They'll have entire cities of Chinese, and they only speak Chinese, and on and on.
Well, they didn't give it to China. They gave it back to Panama, and the Chinese just came on in with financial investment, and they're building a whole new series of larger locks. That's what China is doing to expand its influence around the world. They're building infrastructure like the One Belt, One Road. They're enlarging the Panama Canal. They're doing all these wonderful infrastructure works that is going to be good for commerce, and inevitably that commerce will involve China. And that's the way that you peacefully, take over the world, as opposed to the U.S. method of just dropping bombs on stuff. All right, well, listen, we're going to have to let you go, Pat. The phone lines are open again. We got to take a break for station identification, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. And let me just get this out here. I'm communicating with BitChute about trying to take over from YouTube, although YouTube apparently has stayed out, and I got some email on that one here. Let's see. Let me just get this little stuff cleared up. Okay, so we're talking about the very obvious run-up to war with Iran. And a lot of people are saying, okay, it's time for a false flag, which means whatever happens, nobody's going to believe it. Story over at Mint Press News, with the U.S.-Iran war ball now rolling, could an accident or false flag serve as pretext? And basically, British Foreign Minister Jeremy Hunt, after his meeting with U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, openly stated as much on Monday, saying that Britain was worried of a conflict breaking out between the U.S. and Iran by accident, with an escalation that is unintended, really, on either side, but ends with a conflict. Oh, come on. Of course it's intended. The U.S. has been intending to get this going for a very, very long time. No question about that. Another article on the same vein, and again, Mint Press News, history's dire warning, beware false flag trigger for long-sought war with Iran. Meanwhile, over in Iraq, the U.S.-led coalition there has been placed on high alert over a supposed threat to U.S. forces inside Iraq. So Operation Inherent Resolve is now at a high-level alert, and the United States government has ordered all non-essential personnel to leave Iraq. They're basically withdrawing staff from the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad, and as well as the U.S. Consulate in Erbil. American nationals were advised to avoid U.S. government sites in Iraq and leave the country as soon as possible. So it looks like something may happen there that they're going to blame on Iran. So, yeah, something flies on in, blows up a U.S. building. Oh my goodness, Iran has attacked us. Well, thank goodness we already have military forces right here in Iraq. We'll just go on in and march into Iran. Little bit of a fly in the ointment on that one. Baghdad is refusing to let Washington use its territory in a war against Iran. I guess they probably remember that last war that was ginned up by the United States. So Iraq's envoy is saying that Iraq does not want a devastating new war in the Middle East, and it will not allow the U.S. to use its territory for military action against Iran. This came from Baghdad's ambassador to Moscow. And basically saying Iraq is a sovereign nation. We will not let the U.S. to use our territory. This came from Haidar Mansour Hadi, the Iraqi envoy to Russia. And, of course, the issue is Iraq may not be in a position to stop it. The U.S. could literally turn around and say, okay, well, you know, we're back at war with Iraq too, and after we're done slapping you down, we're just going to continue on into Iran. But again, a lot of our allies are not on board with this. Germany and the Netherlands have halted their missions in Iraq. They're suspending their participation in this inherent resolve. Germany is suspending its participation in the Iraqi military training program. And a spokesman for the Defense Ministry has confirmed this information, saying that Germany has no indications of potential attacks allegedly supported by Iran. So Germany is saying the same thing that British general is saying. We're not seeing it. We don't see it out here. Over in Kuwait, their emir is calling on their army to prepare for regional developments. They're at a highest level of caution because of all the dangerous developments. During a visit to the General Presidency of the Kuwaiti National Guard Forces, Al-Sabah said, "You are well aware of the serious developments around us in the region that require you to take the highest level of caution while carrying out your duties." So Kuwait is apparently thinking it could spin way, way out of control. Over in Libya, NATO, after trashing the place, is saying it's willing to help. NATO is ready to help Libya in setting up security structures if conditions are favorable. This is coming from Alliance Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg. And apparently Stoltenberg held a meeting with UN Special Envoy to Libya, Ghassan Salama, on Monday to discuss the situation, which NATO is basically responsible for. But if you read through this article, and they're talking about security conditions being favorable, what they're saying is if you align with NATO, if you align with the West, we're going to undo at least some of the damage we've done to your country over the last several years. I don't know what Libya's response is likely to be. I don't think it's going to be enthusiastic. Okay, we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Story out of checkpointasia.net, basically saying that the reality is that the United States is losing in Afghanistan, and they're trying to hide it. Now, so far, this war, the second longest war in U.S. history after Korea, it's cost 2,400 American lives, nearly $1 trillion. And there's no doubt America lost it, which puts them in company with the British and the Soviet Union. But apparently the Trump White House is just shut down all the reports with relevant, measurable data It's all classified now. You don't need to know what's going on in Afghanistan, apparently, even if it's your kid over there. All right, getting over to Israel. Everyone's talking about the deal of the century as more and more details leak out. It's obvious that basically the goal of the deal of the century is endless apartheid for the Palestinians. The Trump's deal of the century does not have an end to Israeli rule or an end to its policies of colonization in Palestine. What it does is entrench existing Israeli policies while demanding that the Palestinians finally submit to the Israeli state or face the wrath of Israeli and American power should they resist. Now, central to the deal is this repackaging, if you will, of the status quo that is meant to legitimize Israel's colonial practices on Palestinian territories. And that includes legitimizing the radical demographic transformations, forced population transfers, and settlement building carried out by the Israeli state since 1967, an ongoing process of dispossession that dates back to the Nakba in 1948. Now, the U.S. ambassador to Israel, David Friedman, was out there at a celebration of the one-year anniversary of the U.S. moving the embassy to Jerusalem, and said that Israel is on the side of God, saying that's a secret weapon not too many countries have. Boy, that is laying it on there with a trowel. So PLO officials have viewed this declaration as an extremely negative sign for already struggling U.S.-Palestinian ties. Okay, we got a caller on the line. Ken in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Howdy, howdy. We got air bases on Afghanistan and Iraq. They're on both sides of Iran, and the Navy will come up the south. They come from the west, they come from the east, they come from the south.
Yes.
That's what it looks like to me.
Yeah. They're going to get hammered the same way that Iraq did. And
exactly. I don't think Iran's going to do anything. I hope not.
Well, I don't think Iran is going to do anything. I think something's going to be done and blamed on Iran. The war is going to be started with falsehoods and lies. I mean, there never were any weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11. We even have George W. Bush on video admitting that Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11. And yet we were basically sold on that war as revenge for 9/11.
Oh, sorry. Next talk, I'm going.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. Now, Iran yesterday called for a referendum in the occupied Palestinian territories to include Muslims, Christians, and Jews to decide on a viable system of governments. This is coming from the Anadolu Agency. And the appeal came in a statement released by Iran's foreign ministry to mark the passage of 71 years since the Palestinian Nakba. And I think Iran's idea is it's time to have that single unified federal government over Palestine instead of PLO on one side and Hamas on the other. Okay, we have another caller on the line. Tom in Florida, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Good day to you, sir. Yes, what's on my mind, Michael, is a few things. But first off, they're talking about the birth rate in this country in 32 years. It's way down, except California. So we already know where that's going.
Yes.
The birth rate's down for 32 years, but California, which is ready to implode, there's no water and all that. And you got almost over 7 million illegals there. We know what's going to happen there. But the rest of the population, I believe you're going to have to start paying some American women money to have children. I'll give them like a $25,000 incentive. I mean, that could happen down the road. But another reason I really called is I think there's a great idea out there, what should be happening, Michael, and I think you're going to agree with this. While we put factories in China, why don't we put the factories over in Central America? Let these Central Americans go back with factories so they can start producing products for United States consumption or consumers. And if that's the case, with the Chinese playing in and all this with tariffs, we got cheap labor right there in Central America.
Well, some companies have tried to do that, but it doesn't work as well, to be blunt about it. And it appears to be a cultural thing. But some American automakers did open auto factories down in Mexico and other places, and they're struggling just to get by.
I didn't really know that. I know that Chinese, I don't care what Joe Biden, what Sleepy Joe's saying, China's not no buddy to us, okay? I believe that, they they totally want world dominance, and they're going to get it, the old Chinese water torture, if we don't stop what they're trying to do to us.
Well, China isn't doing anything to us. We did it to ourselves. And you need to remember that, these are American corporations that are manufacturing in China. And when they bring these American products back to sell in America, the tariffs get hit and you pay more for that product.
Well, it's all about greed, Michael. It's all about the greed in these corporations.
It's about corporate greed here. China did not set out to steal our manufacturing. These American corporations went over there and said, hey, you guys make great factories. Your people work very hard. We think we can make our products here for a lot less. And that was it. And back during the Bush administration, tax codes were actually changed to encourage this offshoring.
Yeah, right. That's correct. Yeah, one more thing, Michael, I'll let you go. I know you heard about the case in Texas where all these illegals are getting married. They're marrying somebody and then they got busted, a big ring of them. Well, that's been going on for 30, 40 years with this. I guarantee you got over 1 million illegals in this country who pulled that number. Not just, what was it, 80 of them? They caught 80 people in Texas marrying somebody off, and then that's been going on for 30, 40 years, and I bet it's in the millions with that nonsense. And the government's just now getting around to that. That's been happening. I don't understand that. They've been knowing that for years and years and years, and now all of a sudden, it's a big deal on the news. Well, this ain't nothing but an invasion. That's all it is, Michael.
It actually is. It actually is. And, the federal government has clearly failed to protect our borders, and whether that is incompetence on one side or, again, the Democrats wanting the open borders and the globalists and all of that nonsense. But, our country is being invaded, and it is a huge, huge strain on our nation's resources.
Absolutely. Well, Michael, my sister lives out in Phoenix, and she told me the hospitals over there are overwhelmed. It's unbelievable. Somebody's got to take care of him. And one more thing, Michael. What about Ben Carson? He said something about the illegals can't get Section 8 housing. You hear anything about that?
Well, I think he was responding to the fact that Trump was going to end Section 8 housing for illegal immigrants. And I think he should. If you want to solve the illegal immigrant problem, stop giving away the free stuff. I mean, we live in a nation with some of the highest medical costs in the world, and yet the illegal immigrants are being promised free medical care by people like, I think, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. A couple of people came on out this last week and said, we have to give these illegal immigrants free medical care. How about free medical care for the American people? How about free medical care for Claire for her back?
Exactly, Michael, right on. That was Kamala Harris. She's saying we should give all these illegals medical, and Biden. You know what? Why don't they go to live in their countries and see if they'll get medical treatment, Kamala Harris? I bet you won't get nothing free over where those people are running away from. It's a disaster, Michael. And when my sister told me what's going on at the hospitals in Arizona, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She said it's horrible, terrible. I can tell you stories, but I don't want to get on there and get all excited and frustrated. But this illegal invasion, Michael, has definitely got to stop. I'm just waiting for Trump to put the troops on the border. I don't think it'll ever happen. I think he's full of hot air on that one.
I'm afraid you may be right on that. He's had 2.5 years, coming up on 2.5 years, to actually accomplish something tangible at that border. It isn't there. I don't know how much fence has actually been built, but it's probably just a token amount.
It's unbelievable. It really is. But I'll tell you what, Michael, I'll hang up. I know one thing. Israel made sure they secured their borders.
Oh, absolutely. And they had U.S. taxpayer money to do it.
That's right. An equivalent of over $2.8 billion from what I hear. Almost $3 billion of our tax money went to build the funding of Israelis' wall, fencing and all that, their borders. They don't want to do, they want to get this Pelosi and all that. They want to give Trump even $1 billion. It's unbelievable.
It is. It is absolutely unbelievable.
She's worth $56 million, Pelosi. She's worth millions of dollars. Her and Maxine Waters. I don't know where to get the money, but we're very well off.
Well, most of no, I'm sorry, I was about to confuse her with Nancy Pelosi, where most of that money comes from the husband. But there's no doubt he took advantage of Pelosi's position for his business deals. As far as Maxine Waters, no, I don't know where she got all of her money. But it is amazing how many multimillionaires there are in Congress when you look at the actual salary they're paid to be there. Anyway, Tom, I got to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials. We got another caller waiting on the line, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to go back to the phones here to David in Iceland. Aloha, David. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello. I was just thinking about, usually when they're doing this false flags and everything, they sometimes use, the same method over and over again.
Yes.
And, when the war broke out in Yugoslavia, there was a Eurovision Song Contest in Yugoslavia.
Yes.
Okay. And now the Eurovision Song Contest, that is supposed to bring everyone together in Europe and unite and celebrate that World War II is over.
Well,
and
this year it's in Israel, and apparently it's not bringing a lot of people together.
No, actually not. They've been giving away, the tickets, and they've been buying celebrities from Iceland to come over there for free.
Ah.
Giving them both free flights and tickets and hotels, because they can't fill up the seats. Because more information about this, and I think Bill Clinton gave some stupid excuse for bombing the China embassy in Yugoslavia, that they were their bombers were sailing by old sailing maps or something, and they were using GPS at the time.
Yes.
This smells to high heaven.
Yeah, a lot of people at the time just said, tensions with China were high at that point as well, and it may have been just the United States, goosing them, if you will.
I was only 10 years old when this was, so I can't remember that well. But I think someone, someone of your listeners should, look this up and someone who knows more about this than me to find out something, if there's similarities or something.
Okay.
I just want to thank you. Okay.
All right.
Maybe you do it. Okay. You remember a lot of things. So thank you for taking my call.
All right. You're welcome. Thank you very much. The phone lines are open. And I just got an email here talking about me hating on the Germans. I don't hate the Germans. When I worked there in Germany, I had a great time. But there are some historical incidents that are very negative. Okay, getting on back to Israel and Palestine. The United Nations Agency for Palestinian Refugees is saying that food aid for Gaza is about to run out, and saying that it has to secure $60 million by June to be able to provide food aid to 1 million Palestinian refugees in Gaza. Now, some 620,000 Palestinians in Gaza survive on just $1.60 per day. An additional 390,000 survive on around $3.50 per day. Now, this may be part of the tactic that Trump and Netanyahu are going to use to get Palestine to go along with the deal of the century. You've got the threat of military attack on one hand, and you're starving them to death on the other hand, and they're just going to go on in and say, hey, go along with the deal, and, we'll start letting the food back in. Now, speaking of the Eurovision contest, and apparently from that last caller, the calls for an international boycott may be working. But apparently Palestinian musicians have set up their own Gaza Vision music festival. They've set it up in the rubble of an 8-story residential building destroyed in recent Israeli airstrikes. This was not by accident. They're trying to send a Gaza message to the world. So apparently, to launch the message, the Jusur International Communications Group held a concert on the ruins of the home of the Abu Ammar family, which was bombed back during the May 4 to May 6 attacks. Alrighty, Israel has approved an additional 940 housing units in the East Jerusalem settlements. Some of these are going to be very high-rise buildings. And again, all of these settlements are illegal under international law. Now, there's been a meeting between the president of Austria and Vladimir Putin, and Putin came out talking to reporters saying that the United States is attempting to derail certain projects involving Russia, such as Nord Stream 2, and saying that basically the United States is trying to impose its services on other countries, both in the economic and defense spheres. Well, I've been telling you that for quite a while. The United States is arm twisting these other countries to say, you will buy our products, not their products. You will use our petroleum, not their petroleum. And looks like Putin has called them on it. We have to take another break for commercials, and we will be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And as a matter of fact, we have a caller on the line right now. Robert in Kansas. Aloha, Robert. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Thank you for taking my call. You had said just a minute ago that Germany had this nefarious past that you were concerned with. What exactly do you mean when you say that?
Well, let me make the comment that every nation has dark periods in its history, including this one right here. But I basically wanted to address the issue that I got in this email, that I hate the German people. I don't. And that I had a very positive experience when I worked in Germany.
Well, I don't think that about you, Mike. You love everyone. You demonstrate that. I was just curious, do you believe the things that we are taught about World War I, World War II, and Germany, the Nazis, Hitler? Do you believe that those are the archetypes of evil, the way that our current government teaches?
No, I don't. And as a matter of fact, I even make reference to that in my article, All Wars Are Bankers' Wars. We know that World War I started between Austria-Hungary and Serbia, but then Israel was declared the enemy because at that time German industry was taking off and Great Britain couldn't compete. And so they smashed Germany. They saddled them with a private central bank, which led to the Weimar inflation. And that created the political climate that allowed the Nazis to take over. And the Nazis got rid of the private central bank. They issued a value-based currency. They began to re-industrialize Germany. And it really took off. Once freed from that private central bank, Germany's economy lit up. In fact, it was called the German Miracle. And Time magazine made Adolf Hitler their Man of the Year for the positive change he'd brought to Germany. Of course, for the other nations that were still enslaved to private central banks, this was a problem. They couldn't compete anymore. And as early as 1930, Winston Churchill was making broadcasts on British radio that Germany had to be brought back down again.
Well, Mike, absolutely. And I've watched All Wars Are Bankers' Wars a dozen times, if not more, and distributed it as far as I can. A masterful, just excellent work you did there. Thank you for that.
Well, thank you for the compliment, but the article is a lot better. There's a lot more information in the article than in the video, and the article is permanently linked at the very top of my main page, right underneath where it says email WRH.
Okay, Mike, I have a question, though. Would I be wrong going about and describing the efforts of Germany during that period of time as going to war against the New World Order? Would I be correct in stating that they were going to war against the international banking system that is currently our satanic government?
I think the argument could be made that, that was really the opposition to Germany, that they didn't dare let Germany break free of the banking cartel, because the rest of the world would see how great things were in Germany and say, we want to do that too. See, that the big illusion that we're all sold in our public schools and everything is this is the way banking is supposed to be. I remember being shown film strips in our in grade school about the Federal Reserve and how this is how it all works and it's all wonderful. But we know that this country was started with a very different economic structure. We know that various presidents throughout our history have attempted to break free of private central banking. And were successful at some times, and they paid a heavy price for it. But yeah, most people walking around don't understand there's a different way to run a nation's economy that works for the people and for the nation itself, and not for the private bankers.
And then currently, Mike, what they're doing with Iran, Venezuela, and a few other examples, North Korea, is they're bringing those nations back under that same system where,
yes.
Just like Germany and Hitler, what they're saying is that these are the bad guys because they're trying to be free of our system. And so we're trying to bring them back under what is effectively slavery to a central banking system. I just find it fascinating that our school system teaches us what they teach us about Germany, the Nazis, and Hitler for the reasons that they do. It's basically Satan pointing at Hitler saying this is the bad guy, and I find that to be just fascinating. But thank you, Michael, for the conversation. I agree with you on everything, like always, and I hope you have a really good day. Say hi to Claire.
I certainly will. Thank you very much, and the phone lines are now open. Okay, well, Mike Pompeo had a meeting with Russia's Putin and Foreign Minister Lavrov. They discussed a range of security issues at meetings in Sochi, including the situations in Iran and Venezuela, and have agreed to take steps on arms control while expressing hope for improving the bilateral relations. This is coming out of Sputnik News. Now, this sounds like basically a press release from the U.S. side about how Pompeo to any arms control agreement with the United States, because the United States has repeatedly demonstrated it doesn't stick with its agreements. It pulled out of the P5+1 deal, the Iran nuclear deal. It looks to be pulling out, it just pulled out of that intermediate range nuclear forces deal. So the deal is worthless. It's not even worth the paper it's written on. What is the USA doing in the Eastern Hemisphere? Now, that was in response to Pompeo's comments the other day about how Russia should butt out of the Western Hemisphere, meaning Venezuela. Just back off and let us do what we're going to do to Venezuela. So speaking of which, Juan Guaido's envoy is set to meet with Pentagon officials to plan ways of bringing democracy to Venezuela. That's going to be the excuse. They're bringing democracy to Venezuela, ignoring, of course, that Venezuela is a democracy. They had elections last year. Maduro won. Guaido didn't even run. So looks like we may be looking at a war down there. Washington has ordered an immediate suspension of all air travel between the United States and Venezuela. And apparently the Department of Land's airports caused by the ongoing political crisis. Actually, it's just another way of trying to economically strangle them. Story coming out of Zero Hedge. Corporate media reaches an all-time low on Venezuela coverage, and it's simply a commentary saying that, once again, the corporate media is, yes, let's go to war. They're out there with their pom-poms and their short skirts cheering, let's go to war, yeah, let's go to war, yeah. But every time the United States saves a country, it converts it into either an insane asylum or a cemetery. This is from Latin American author Eduardo Galeano. And that's absolutely true. If you look at all of the countries, the U.S. has regime changed, invaded, drone struck. Life is always worse. They're driven into poverty. The nation is plundered by corporate interests. And have you ever noticed how the corporate media never talks about the United States starting a war? It's always stumbling into the war or sliding into the war. They're trying to sell this idea that the U.S. regrets all the wars, doesn't really want to have all the wars. It's just something that happens. You know, we woke up this morning and by golly, there was another war out there. It's just so frustrating. Alrighty. North Korea is now demanding the return of that cargo ship that was seized by the United States. They're declaring the U.S. seizure a robbery, and they're demanding that the ship be returned immediately. So, and not having enough places to fight over, apparently the United States is now stretching its military muscle up in the Arctic. Now there's this organization that sort of, the members are all the countries that actually border the Arctic. And the organization basically makes sure that there's this cooperation and everybody gets, you know, their commerce done. And apparently Pompeo, even before he had snubbed Angela Merkel in Germany, he'd basically gone into this meeting and just tried to throw the U.S. weight around. So this Arctic Council, basically, Pompeo went into this Arctic Council and just took on that stance of confrontation, patronizing criticism. It is very depressing. All these wars that are out there, all the people who are dying, all the people whose homes are being destroyed, their towns are being destroyed, their countries are being destroyed, and for what? The petrodollar. It's a very telling commentary on the human condition. All right, let's turn to some of our domestic politics here. And Attorney General William Barr has appointed John H. Durham to investigate how this whole Russian hoax got started. Now, Durham currently is Connecticut's top federal prosecutor. He's an attorney with a reputation for toughness and a resume that includes investigations. The matter is being taken by Barr. Well, it sounds good. An investigation sounds good, but I think probably most people right now are saying, I'm tired of all the, it could be, it may be, it's in progress, we're looking, we're doing that. We want to see people in handcuffs. We want to see people under indictment. We want to see people before a jury. We want to see people going to jail. The people who were behind this whole Russia-Trump collusion, Russiagate hoax, literally were trying a coup d'etat against the elected government of the United States of America, aided and abetted by the entire corporate media. At the very least, we should start seeing some massive firings. Now, former Congressman Trey Gowdy was on an interview with Fox News' Sean Hannity, in which he dropped a hint for Attorney General Barr, and he said, look for the emails between Brennan and Comey. And so, if I were Barr, I would definitely take a look at that here. White House counsel Pat Cipollone wrote in a letter earlier today to House Judiciary Chairman Gerald Nadler that Congress doesn't get to do a do-over of Special Counsel Robert Mueller's Russia investigation and others conducted by the Justice Department. As you probably are already aware, Congress was very unhappy that the Mueller report came up empty in terms of Trump-Russia collusion. After all the noise that was made by it, you know, all the corporate media wailing, Rachel Maddow especially was out there saying, oh, absolutely there was collusion. We still have members of Congress saying, of course there was collusion. And they're saying, we want to look at all the evidence and we want to go over it. We want to have our own do-over investigation. And the White House counsel saying, no, there's been an investigation. It found nothing. There's no reason to do it over again. Now, apparently, Rudy Giuliani was planning to conduct a probe regarding Joe Biden's son doing business in Ukraine, was under threat of prosecution, and somehow or other, the prosecutor got fired. And the story is that Joe Biden applied pressure to the government of Ukraine, and Rudy Giuliani wanted to investigate that, but apparently he's called that trip off now. So, apparently Liz Cheney and the outrage machine are still infuriated about Rashida Tlaib's comments. And you can almost get a sense of Islamophobia. We have two Muslim congresswomen, both of them are under constant attacks. And all Tlaib did was refer to her Palestinian ancestry and how tragic the aftermath of the Holocaust had been for Palestine. Now, Pete Buttigieg was out there speaking in Las Vegas, and he made a comment about the excessive influence of money in politics, and he made a specific reference to Sheldon Adelson. And he said, I know I'm a guest in Sheldon Adelson's town, which got boos from the audience. He says, but I know in a real democracy means that the voice you have in our political process is gauged by the merits of what you have to say and not by the number of zeros in your bank balance. And of course, he's now been denounced as an anti-Semite. Okay, we have to take yet another break for commercials, and we'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And Mark Cuban, who's the owner of the NBA's Dallas Mavericks, star of the show Shark Tank, was basically being interviewed on CNBC this week and came out and said there is nobody in the current field of Democrat candidates facing Donald Trump that can win. and he sort of dropped a hint that he might run for president as an independent. Well, Mark, yes, you've got a nice little football team, and like the president, you're the star of a reality show, but I think you're being a little bit ambitious. As far as this comment about the Democratic lineup, well, it's too soon to say, because there are so many of them, and I would start to think we would have seen some drop out by now, but I guess they're all hanging on. Now, do you remember Anthony Weiner, Huma Abedin's ex, about his ordeal, Mein Kampf? And so far, apparently, he's not getting a lot of interest. I certainly wouldn't be interested in reading about that here. Okay, let's talk about the economic news here. Things are getting very, very serious. Donald Trump is out there saying we always win, and that the U.S. will be victorious in our little squabble with China. And Trump is out there warning he might stack even more tariffs on this huge pile of anti-China duties in order to put additional pressure on Beijing. But again, he's pushing on the wrong place. Those aren't Chinese companies manufacturing goods to sell to the United States. Those are American companies manufacturing in China to bring the products back to the U.S. for sale. That's where Trump ought to be putting the pressure. Now, China is out there calling for a people's war against the U.S. and vows to fight for a new world. And so now we're starting to see where things might really be headed with this. Because this is not just a trade war between the United States and China. It's going to, I think, develop into a war over who is the most powerful economy on the planet. And I predict China is likely to win. So getting on back to China itself, Chinese state media put out these editorials and op-eds. It slammed what it labeled the Trump administration's greed and arrogance. The most important thing is that in the China-U.S. trade war, the U.S. side fights for greed and arrogance. The Chinese side is fighting back to protect legitimate interests. We're going to take a break for station identification. Got a caller waiting on the line. Back with hour number 3 after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And let's go back to the phones here to Jim in Illinois. Aloha, Jim. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, Michael, with all of these, not all of these states, but certain states passing these abortion laws and clinics being shut down throughout the country, why are they passing these bills unless they want Donald Trump's supporters to get really behind him? And the other question, I think the state of Alabama, they passed a law where if a doctor does an abortion, he can go to jail for life. Why don't they do the same thing for doctors that prescribe these narcotics or these other drugs?
Well, I can see your point there. I think there's a perceived degree of difference between the ending of what many people see as a human life that is innocent as opposed to a life that's been lived at least to some point. But again, I think this brouhaha about abortions is being kicked up as a campaign issue for 2020.
I would agree with that. But because you look at the states, Ohio, Alabama, Kentucky, I think Indiana is going to be next. I think you're right about that. But again, every single Democrat, they all support abortion. So that's a lost issue for them.
Well, no, it isn't. They're going to campaign against all these new restrictive laws. I mean, they're already talking about the one they just passed in Alabama is going to be headed for the Supreme Court.
Well, isn't that what Trump wants? Because maybe he can overturn Roe v. Wade?
I don't think he's going to want to try and do that in an election year. The Democrats are just going to use that.
That's a very good point. But it will be a fight which everyone will have a comment, even though I am against abortion, except for in the case of rape and incest. I think it should be very interesting to decide when the Supreme Court decides if they have the opportunity to decide regarding Roe versus Wade. But I think you're right. It is a way to get people to the polls, and for people that really support Trump, stay with him.
Well, again, the Democrats are looking for an issue to campaign on in 2020. They don't really have a lot. They've gone so far to the left, with all this transgender stuff and the rest of it. They're manufacturing a new platform, and it's going to be the issue of abortion.
Right. Well, again, that's an issue which is a personal issue, but as far as the real issues that affect everyone, they aren't dealing with, unfortunately.
Okay.
All right, Michael, take care.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. And so we're talking about the economic news here. Over at Goldman Sachs, Lloyd Blankfein, who used to be all about free trade and that's all going to be wonderful, he's flipped over on the other side. And he's out there saying, yeah, tariffs are great. And it's interesting how many people are coming on down on the side of the great trade war, if you will. Steve Bannon appeared on CNBC to discuss the importance of the trade fight, and guest host Tom Friedman said he agreed entirely with this thing. Even Chuck Schumer has urged Trump not to capitulate and make sure that the U.S. gets the best deal possible. Mitch McConnell, on the other hand, is out there reminding the world that a trade war produces no winners. It produces a restart. So Paul Craig Roberts wrote this article, was over at Information Clearinghouse, and he says, whenever I look at U.S. policy, foreign or domestic, I see only insanity, ignorance, and incompetence. And then he goes right onto the issue of the tariffs. And he says it's a mistaken approach to bring the jobs back home. And he, too, makes the point. The Chinese did not steal American jobs. The jobs were taken to China by U.S. global corporations, along with the technology and business know-how to maximize U.S. corporate profits. It was these corporations who did this, not Beijing. Okay, another article, this one over at Russia Insider, saying the U.S. and China will never return to the way things were. That world is over. And I think they're absolutely right. And they too are saying the trade war is just one battle in a much larger, increasingly unstable struggle between the U.S. and China for global power and leverage to shape the next paradigm of world history. And China is winning. It's like I was telling that caller. China has, over the last couple of decades, they're investing in global infrastructure for commerce, knowing that much of that commerce will benefit them. The new, larger locks at the Panama Canal, the One Belt, One Road. So, another article on the same topic. This one's out of Investment to Watch blog. Is China being removed as a U.S. trading partner and being replaced by India? Well, India's an up-and-comer. They certainly have plenty of workforce. I don't know how their manufacturing compares with that of China, but I know they've got some. So we're going to do a quick shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And we're going to take a phone call from Peter in California. Aloha, Peter. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, it's interesting to me that the foremost proponents in the past for absolute, free markets and, free flow of capitalism used to be the American banks. And now what we're seeing, since China and Russia and the BRIC nations have their own banking system free of the central banks, now you see guys like Blankfein flipping.
Yes.
And this is more. There's a side to all this that's more than just national. It's banking.
Yes.
And it's they're losing their dominance. If they lose, if the Federal Reserve and the Rothschilds and all these people that are into this private central bank stuff lose this war, they lose their dominance. And so they cannot have these upstart nations, hoarding gold and issuing gold-backed economy currencies and so on and so forth. And they can't control them. They don't have. There is no fifth column in China, or at least in China certainly. But there is, of course, in the United States and Britain that control everything anyway. And so this is all one unified thing, in my opinion. So, what do you think?
Yeah, it is all one unified thing, and the clash of civilizations that they were talking about back during the Bush era, it really is a war between banking systems. And on the one hand, you have that predatory, all currency is loaned into existence, loaned into circulation, versus the system that the United States started with, which was that government coins the money and spends it into circulation, and it powers commerce without accruing interest, and then is taxed back in the same amount to balance the books. That's what this country started with, and it worked. And the United States was a rapidly developing nation, and most of Europe, which were already tangled up with private central banks, couldn't compete. Ben Franklin learned all about this when he went over as our ambassador to Great Britain. And following the revelation that the U.S. was simply, creating the money and spending it into circulation rather than loaning it, that's what led King George III to sign his Currency Act. And that Currency Act was the prime driving force that eventually led to the revolution.
Yeah, I agree. I think that our prosperity was built on what we did before 1913, primarily.
Yes,
it was built on that, and we saw Germany's rise in the 30s was done with a system that was similar and was attacked, and it's just what are you gonna do? It's these guys, they just don't have enough Holocaust educational programs over there in China they just need more of those. Like, what can I tell you?
Yeah.
Anyways, that's it for me. I just wanted to call in and say that. Thank you, man.
All right. Thanks an awful lot, Peter. We're going to let you go. The phone lines are open. And apparently, American farmers have really been hit by all these tariffs and all this trade war, not just China, but Europe as well, or Russia as well. And apparently the Trump administration has made $8.5 billion in direct payments to farmers through a 2018 aid program designed to counter the losses stemming from the trade war with China. And apparently he's asking for another $15 billion because it looks like this trade war is going to basically continue. So this is in addition to the fact that the American taxpayer is already paying higher prices at the stores for anything coming from China. And the prices are really, really going up. We're already seeing it at the stores here. So the American taxpayer is getting hit twice. We're paying the higher prices at the store, and then our tax money, which should be going to fix our roads and bridges and so forth, is now being used to prop up the farmers who are being harmed by the tariffs. It doesn't strike me as a really workable strategy. Concern is being raised over at Zero Hedge. Are the equity markets too complacent about the Iran tensions. It's like they're not really paying attention. They're focused to just really shake things up. There's going to be immediate oil price jump, and the world just feels so fragile right now. Here's another article on the same topic. This is from Middle East Monitor. Middle East tensions push up oil prices, and Brent crude is now costing $71.75 a barrel. That's an increase of 1.9%. The cost of a barrel of U.S. crude is now $62.48, up 2.6%. The increasers have introduced legislation targeting the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. This is the pipeline that is running from Russia to Germany, and it has been criticized by the United States and even some people in the European Union. It would bypass Ukraine, and it would basically allow Russia to sell more of their oil and gas to Germany. So the bill's introduced by Republican Senators Ted Cruz, John Barrasso, and Tom Cotton, and Democrat Jeanne Shaheen. And it seeks to impose travel and financial sanctions on companies and individuals involved in constructing the pipeline. So we're going to have a trade war with China and an economic war with Russia, because that's exactly what this is. That pipeline does not present any kind of a military or security threat to the United States of America. It's all about market share, about keeping Germany buying oil from the Middle East or the United States. All right. Story out of Zero Hedge. Global trade is collapsing. It's almost down to depression levels. And it's got to be frustrating. There were starting to be signs that there was a real recovery starting to take hold, and then you have all these new trade tensions, and it just shoves it all down again. Now, apparently, Huawei and their affiliates have just been placed on a U.S. trade blacklist over the national security concerns. And the move will require U.S. sellers to obtain licenses from the U.S. government prior to marketing products from the companies. It's just a way of trying to slow them down, keep them out of the American marketplace here. Over at Walmart, they are introducing a next-day delivery service. This is a direct challenge to Amazon, because now the two models are the same. You go to the Walmart website, you buy something, it's at your home the next day. So we'll see what happens with that one. Speaking of the central banks, they are buying gold at the fastest pace in 6 years. Earlier this month, the World Gold Council published its quarterly report, and it shows that central banks and foreign governments from around the world are buying up gold as fast as they can. And it says a lot about the future of the dollar. So we'll see what's going to happen. Speaking of gold, over in Sudan, their rapid support forces have seized 241 kilograms of gold from a Moroccan plane flying from the country's River Nile state, which landed in the capital, Khartoum. Now, Major General Othman Mohammed said that only 93 kilograms of the gold on board had an export license, while the legal status of the remaining quantity has not yet been clarified. The Major General explained, "We must deliver this large amount of gold to the Bank of Sudan, and then we'll go on with the necessary legal procedures." So somebody's trying to move gold around without leaving a trail. Well, they finished totaling up the losses of Uber's IPO, and it came up at $1.2 billion, making it the biggest IPO loser in the history of the stock market. It was a bad one, and a lot of people took a clubbing on that one. Over in Israel, during that 2-day assault against the Gaza Strip earlier this month, they had to shut down gas production from the Tamar gas field, and Israel, as a result, lost $16.8 million. So, Israeli member of the Knesset, Orit Farkash HaKohen, revealed the $16.8 million loss and said it would be recouped from tax funds. So let's talk about immigration and globalism. This is an article from VDare, and it talks about the fact Donald Trump vowed to end birthright citizenship if he became president. And with the obvious collapse of the southern border and the migrants just pouring on in, it is now vital that this issue be acted on, or otherwise we're going to see America voted out of our own country. Because the illegals are coming in, they're popping out those anchor babies, and once they have an anchor baby, they can't be deported. Now, I understand birthright citizenship is a thorny issue. You would expect that babies born of American citizens would be automatic citizens. You would expect that babies born of 2 naturalized American citizens would be citizens. But this idea that anybody who is born here in the U.S. becomes a citizen automatically, obviously that's become a problem. We got to take a break for commercials. We got a caller waiting on the line, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We have a caller on the line, Don in Iowa. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, Mike. This live stream has been having problems today, but I also find that when I try the alternative, which is to click on that where it says listen live to the radio, and then there's a plug-in or something, that doesn't last very long either. It'll crap out on you too. It'll say plug-in failure after a while.
Well, you know, the internet service in this country is problematic, shall we say. Spectrum has never delivered the bandwidth that we pay for. They actually got sued in New York for false advertising on that very issue. And if you look at websites like Down Detector and various other online tools, you can see sections of the internet aren't holding up. Like everything else in this country, it's not really being maintained. And
maybe when you get to Indiana, you'll be able to get on a better service or something. When you get
I'm certainly hoping so. I'm certainly hoping so, because the service out here, I mean, it's adequate except for this live stream feed. But again, that could be YouTube rather than Spectrum. I don't really know. That's a big problem with computer systems today. There'll be a problem, and you don't know where it's coming from.
It's a shame, because we want to listen live, but then it doesn't. You know, like the thing will just blow up, and also the plug-in, the other deal doesn't work. So it seems like the only solution is to wait and listen to the replay, where you don't have any problems with that, you know. So, but anyway, I'd like to make a comment briefly on what Layla was talking about. I don't understand exactly. She was saying that he was trying to make the point that Palestine was not officially a country. Well, who cares? Officially, there were human beings living there. They did not issue a cordial invitation to the Zionists to come here and just take over the whole country and start killing us, you know. I mean, it's irrelevant. In the final analysis, it's irrelevant whether it was a loosely coordinated territory or officially a country with a flag and a military and all that. It makes no difference.
Yeah, I thought it was rather arbitrary of her to say, you know, real countries have this, and this, and Palestine doesn't. Therefore, they're not a real country. But I disagree with that. I think Palestine, it's had certainly geographic unity, and even though the population came from many different sources, they lived together in peace. They integrated over hundreds of years. So I think it's rather arbitrary. As that one email said that came on in, doesn't matter if it's a country or not. Israel was built on stolen Palestinian land.
Right, and they have no right to say it's their homeland. If they do, then the Seminoles have a right to say we want to go back to Florida and claim all of Florida. So everybody has to leave, you know.
Yeah, that's exactly right here. And remembering that the vast majority of
Khazars, right? Yeah, I've been reading up on some of this stuff lately, and this is an aspect of history you don't ever hear about in your normal schooling. You know, when you go to school.
No. Schooling is there to tell you the orthodox view of the world, to get you to believe things that are useful for the government for you to believe in.
I got one book I haven't got through yet, but it's called Against Our Better Judgment, and it's about the founding of Israel. So the title kind of gives you a clue what they're getting at. Against Our Better Judgment. So anyway, yeah, history is a good thing if you can find something where they're not trying to just propagandize you. If you're trying to find the real thing. Okay.
Well, these days history is just another form of propaganda, and it's very, very hard to find out what was really going on back then. And even historians start to believe it. They don't know what's going on. Alrighty, thank you very much for the phone call, Dom. We're going to let you go here. And we got about a half an hour left to go in the show, which is good because I'm getting tired. There's a new report out from the United States Sentencing Commission, and it basically reveals that nearly half, 42.7% of all federal crimes committed in 2018 were committed at the hands of non-U.S. citizens. Nearly half of all federal crimes were committed by non-U.S. citizens. So this open borders idea, it's increasing crime in our country. It's a health hazard. It is a serious economic drain. But as long as they all vote Democrat, it will have been worth it. Over in Great Britain, pressure is building on Theresa May to step down. And apparently she is going to launch yet another vote on her withdrawal agreement. We got to take another break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And I was just going through the little news feed I have here on the iPhone. And I'm seeing all these stories about Game of Thrones. Now, don't get me wrong. I like the show. But it's not really news. And it basically, I mean, corporate media has now become so tabloid, but it does give them an excuse to not talk about just how deadly close we are to yet another war with Iran, yet another war with Venezuela, the damage coming from the trade war with China. Oh, well, bread and circuses. But I do like Game of Thrones. All right, back to the phones here. Muir in Wisconsin. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. How you doing?
I'm doing okay.
I wanted to mention the word Aiea means to go upwards.
Yes.
As Ashraf Isat, he's an Egyptian researcher, and others have shown, Yemen is a very verdant, green country.
Yes.
And the original city of David was there. And that's why they're destroying it. But to go upward from there to where they wanted to take over. And in between the Saudis, that was also from the same people. They took over their crypto Jews there in Saudi. But, and the other word, and also Hasham Talawi, he pointed out that in Genesis 23:19, Abraham bought the cave to bury Sarah in. So if that was their land, he wouldn't be buying the cave, wouldn't he? So, but the other word's very important. I think what we don't say, like we very often now say search instead of Google because that was brainwashing, right?
Yes.
So if we were to eliminate an N-word, just like we respect our brown brothers and sisters and don't call them by negative words, I mean, Negro is not a negative word, but we don't even use that. So if we were to always refrain from using an N-word for the Germans, you know, call them National Socialists if you must, but just Germans, plain Germans.
Well, today's Germans are not Nazis.
Exactly, but I'm talking about even back then. Do you know where that word came from? I'll tell
It's a
you.
contraction of National Socialist.
No, it was a colloquialism, Austrian Bavarian, that meant pumpkin or simpleton. And a Jewish man named Conrad Hayden, Konradheiden, he was a publicist, and he spread it far and wide, and as you can see, we still have it. But it was a derogatory term to mean simpleton or bumpkin. And we think of these people, these German people, like you said, with the money, that's also true, and I appreciate that. They were trying to get out of that Weimar Republic. That was horrible. It was filthy.
Yes.
You know, Berlin was like Babylon, the debauchery and everything. In the middle of that swastika is a cross, and these were Christian people. You know, some people say, "Oh, why didn't I?"
I'm going to get emails on that one.
Oh, good. Pope Pius XII, they say, well, why did he remain silent? Because the Holocaust didn't happen at all the way they say. And in fact, it wasn't a thing at all until after the Vietnam War and after Kennedy was killed. Okay, that's when things started to really, really uptick. You know, we had the NAACP, which a lot of black people were furious about because it wasn't run by black people.
Yes.
And then right after they found out black people wouldn't be so easily swayed, they went to the LGBT thing because we got to face it, queer people will flip very easily. I mean, if you look at...
You know, I would like to avoid like these sweeping generalizations. That's not the tone that we like to have on this show here. And I understand that the NAACP was an attempt to sort of direct the energies of the black population. And yes, they did make a mistake by having a white management. Certainly, the LGBT community is being exploited by the liberals again for votes in 2020. The Democrats are reaching out basically to the political fringe. And now I think they're trying to basically revive abortion as a major issue going into 2020 with this law in Alabama.
A personal experience, decades, friends and loved ones, and there may be brilliant people and can do anything, but I have found they are not trustworthy. I'm sorry, but that's how it is. If you're divided between what your moral conduct is and you want to keep some of it secret, well, you're not reliable because you're not forthright and true. I'm sorry, that's how it is. And if you look at Bradley turned Chelsea Manning, look at most of the people that go into the military, they go in to serve and even die. And he turned, so others would die for him. And Assange now, his mind has been wiped. They took him away in October 2016 and brought him back with a white mind, much like they wiped Gary McKinnon's mind.
Okay, I would like to say I'm not entirely sure I buy that last one. And I think Bradley Manning did enlist to serve the country, but when he saw what was going on and how it was not a moral war, how war crimes were being committed, that he felt morally he had to do something about it. And that's when he got that video information and got it to Julian Assange. So anyway, Murr, thank you very much for the history lesson, and we're going to let you go here. Get on back to the news. Okay. Rasmussen recently conducted a poll asking whether males who identify as females should be allowed to compete in women's sports, and found that more than 2-to-1 voters disagree with the idea of allowing biological males to compete against biological females. See, the American people still have some common sense here. I'm surprised it was that low. Apparently, Rasmussen found less than 0.25% quarter of the respondents, 23%, believe a person born as a male but identifying as a female should be allowed to compete in women's competitive sports events. Well, that's a depressing number. So apparently a fifth of the voters were not sure. The poll found that males were more opposed than females. That's a surprise. And yeah. All right, we were talking about Huawei. It's now on a trade blacklist here in the United States. Apparently over in Great Britain, Huawei is offering to sign no spying pacts with governments as these governments start to turn to Huawei for their 5G infrastructure. And Britain is still deciding on how much they're going to rely on Huawei for their 5G networks. But obviously that is a big chunk of money. And the United States companies that wanted to get into 5G, I think, are a little upset. That's probably the reason that they're taking this hostile attitude. We can't compete, so let's crush them down. Let's sanction them. Let's beat them up here. All right, talking about computers here, there's been a new scandal involving the WhatsApp application on cell phones. And apparently, software created by an Israeli spyware firm with links to the murder of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi was used to hack the messaging app WhatsApp. And apparently, WhatsApp discovered earlier this month potential attackers had been able to install malicious surveillance software on iPhones and Android phones by simply ringing targets using the app's phone call function. And that the software could be transmitted even if users did not answer their phones, and that the calls then sometimes would disappear from the call logs. Story coming on out of Blacklisted News saying that the malicious spyware has all the makings of government-sponsored surveillance. Anyway, there's a new hack out there. It's called Zombie Load, and it affects most Intel processors. It exposes keys, browsing history, and more. And the exploit is embedded in Intel's processor chips themselves, meaning even the best designed software patches can only go part of the way to plugging the hole without reducing the chip's performance. The vulnerability may allow attackers to resurrect critical data processed by the chip, from browser history and passwords to disk encryption keys and system-level sensitive data. Oh, my goodness, this is a nasty one. Now, Intel is claiming there's no evidence Zombie Load, rented lips, has been exploited by real-world actors, but as the researchers explain, because it's a hardware vulnerability, attackers who use it may not leave the traces of outside interference found with typical software exploits. It's also unlikely that it could be caught by any antivirus software. So yeah, these at hardware level exploits and bugs, that is really, really nasty. Apparently, Google is introducing a bunch of new ad types today that are going to be showing up through its mobile products, including some that interrupt the core Google search and discovery experiences. Google searches on mobile will soon include gallery ads that allow advertisers to display multiple images for users to swipe through. And the new ad formats are meant to make the ads a lot more noticeable. So, yeah, they're pushing the ads on you, and I wish I could get by with advertisers. I really, really do. I can't at this point. Let's see. Another story about Zombie Load. And yeah, yet another one. All right, so over at the Electronic Frontier Foundation, they have won a major lawsuit against the FBI, and it has to do with what's called a national security letter. Now, this national security letter functions as a warrant but it's issued directly by the FBI and usually includes a gag order saying that whoever received the national security letter can't talk about it. The first rule of national security letter is you don't talk about national security letter. But the Electronic Foundation, Frontier Foundation basically sued, seeking records of how and when the FBI lifts these gag orders issued with the national security letters. And this is hopefully going to provide a window into the FBI's use of the national security letter, which has been historically misused. So NSLs are considered an administrative subpoena, but it amounts to the same thing. Turn over information about your customers, turn over information about your employees, turn over all this information, and you can't tell anybody you did that. All right, we're going to go back to the phones here. Daniel in Canada, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, aloha, Michael. I just thought, since you're on the topic of security and cyber security and so forth, I was just reading there's an Israeli firm that got caught hacking the WhatsApp. I'm not really sure what WhatsApp is, but apparently it's only
well, we just got done talking about it. It's a messaging app, and it's on both iPhone and Android smartphones. And this Israeli code, hang on a second. This Israeli code can be inserted remotely by using WhatsApp's phone feature, and basically unlocks the phone. They can turn on the microphone, they can turn on the camera, they can get any information off of there that they want. And WhatsApp apparently has already issued a patch for this. So if you are using WhatsApp, you may want to think about, hitting the update button right now.
Yeah, I actually heard it on the Canadian mainstream media. So, this thing, maybe it's going to carry some weight, and people might wake up to the fact that, besides all the Israeli spying that was going on. I remember on Fox News, Carl Cameron and Brett Hume exposed that story. It just never ends, and it's getting to the point where we're almost immune to it now. It's just like every other day, it's another.
Well, we shouldn't be immune to it, but there's no question right now that all of our modern electronic devices are just wide open. Apple initially made a big deal over how secure their systems were. But again, apparently hacking and cybercrime are now big business.
Yeah, it's interesting times we live in. All right, thanks.
Well, interesting, yes. Dark, yes. Over at Twitter, they were deploying parody accounts for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and they got a little carried away. They developed this algorithm to identify and automatically ban accounts that satirized Ocasio-Cortez or her allies in Congress. Unfortunately, the algorithm banned Ocasio-Cortez herself. So I guess it determined that what she was tweeting was satire. Facebook has gagged the Italian populists 2 weeks before the EU elections. They've banned 23 major Italian pro-populist pages with a combined 2.5 million followers, just 2 weeks before the European elections. This is coming from Italy's La Stampa. And the majority of the bans were supposedly for supporters of the current coalition government, La Lega, the League, headed by Interior Minister Matteo Salvini, and the Five Star Movement, led by Deputy Prime Minister Luigi Di Maio. Among them, the most popular Facebook page for La Lega was taken down right as polls reveal massive support for the party. Now, Facebook claims the sites were all spreading fake news and hate speech and divisive content about immigrants, vaccines, and Jews. Let's just get all the excuses in there. And Yeah, so social media is now a big propaganda machine. We're going to take a break for commercials. We're going to be back with the last segment of our program after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And as you probably remember from last week, Monsanto lost its third lawsuit in a row regarding the link between glyphosate and cancer. Well, the news is getting worse for them because researchers at the University of California, San Diego School of Medicine say they've discovered an association between glyphosate and negative effects on the human liver. So they published this study in Clinical Gastroenterology and Hepatology, team led by Paul J. Mills, PhD, professor and chief in the Department of Family Medicine and Public Health at UC San Diego School of Medicine, examined glyphosate excretion at the urine samples of two patient groups, those with a diagnosis of non-alcoholic steatohepatitis and those without. And the results were significant. So they're basically saying that people exposed to glyphosate come down with liver disease, or they're more susceptible to liver disease. Over on Fox Business Channel, their business anchor Stuart Varney yesterday lashed out at the California court for awarding more than $2 billion to a couple who accused Roundup weed killer of causing cancer. And he just went on a rant saying that these cancer victims, they're just being awarded way too much money. And I'm sure the court is going to knock that settlement down. Varney went on to say, it's a travesty of justice. Get your case in front of a sympathetic jury, and who knows how much money you can walk away with, but is it justice? There's more lawsuits to come. The German company which makes Roundup faces absolute ruin. Yes, they do. Bayer made a bad decision buying Monsanto. I keep thinking back to Monsanto's argument for reducing that first award from their first courtroom loss. You know, they don't need that much money. They're not going to live that long. Over in China, they're having a major problem with their agriculture, a pest. And since appearing 4 months ago, it has spread to a third of China. It's called the Armyworm. It's native to the Americas, not Asia. And in its larval stage, it can eat through and cause damage to crops such as corn, rice, wheat, sorghum, barley, sugarcane, cotton, soybeans, and peanuts. And there is currently no large-scale solution to get rid of the pest. And the USDA is saying that it was first detected in late January. They're claiming it entered from nearby Burma. And this army worm has no natural predators in China. Well, it may be an act of nature. It could be an act of agricultural sabotage, and it certainly wouldn't be the first time that the CIA intentionally went into a nation and dropped an insect pest onto a crop to destroy it as a means of keeping that country in debt and under their control. Meanwhile, Bill Nye was out there on last week with John Oliver, and he took a blowtorch and burned up a globe and screamed about the world is burning up, and he used some profanity in the process. Okay, there's the music. It's time for me to get on out of here. Please stay tuned for John Stadmiller. I'm sure he's got lots of interesting things to share with you. Please take what you learn here, share it with everybody that you know. Talking with each other right now is key. Call it human net. Don't bother with social media. They're filtering everything. So please donate to Republic Broadcasting. Please donate to whatreallyhappened.com. I can't tell you how bad it is out here. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.